So we have a question about attachment. Is it okay to be attached to family members? And when I was thinking about the question, I thought the question itself is a little strange. It's kind of impossible not to be somewhat attached. And if we were totally detached and not pure devotees, probably something wrong with us. Because many of us, when we were young, we detached from our parents. We became devotees, sometimes didn't talk to them for 10 years. And, Prabhupada saw that kind of detachment, but it was kind of like an imbalanced detachment or a crazy hippie detachment, in some way artificial. And those same devotees who were so detached from their families when they were in their 20s and became devotees, I've seen go through a lot of difficulty when their parents died. There was a lot of emotion, a lot of attachment, and so forth. So they kind of covered that attachment. And so sometimes we think we're detached and we're not. And I would say the other thing I thought initially when I read this question was that it's very awkward to say that I'm not attached to some degree, just completely detached. It's like you don't have a heart. You don't have... Now, when Prabhupada says, don't become attached, we have the example in Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, of the materialistic man dying, thinking of his wife, and he becomes a woman, or thinking of his children, or Jad Bharat, thinking of a deer, and like that. So this is intense attachment which absorbs one's consciousness at the time of death. Because the attachment is so intense, one is thinking that way at the time of death. That's what Prabhupada's talking about. So once Prabhupada was asked, what about attachment to family? This is not mother and father, but this is devotee, wife, husband, children. And Prabhupada said, that attachment is natural. He said, some attachment, it's natural. How can you be without attachment? And if you had no attachment, how could you actually live? It would be very difficult. Although Priyavrata Maharaj did it because he was so duty-bound, even though he was detached, he acted as a perfect father and husband. But for us, if we're so detached, it's a little difficult to be the perfect father and husband. And so Prabhupada's saying, attachment is natural. Some attachment must be there. It's by nature. Otherwise, how can you function? I'm a brahmachari, my guru says, marry this woman, I get married. Totally detached. We have that story of Vishwanath Chakravarti. Thakur, he was so detached, his guru said, no, you have to sleep with your wife, like that. And he just stayed. He said, okay, I'll be in bed and I'll stay up all night and chant japa. So what Prabhupada meant was not that we're just cold and hard, but he meant attachment is natural, but not so much material attachment, not the material side of the attachment, or not the level of attachment that would cause you to not be Krishna conscious, that would cause you to become attached to something that could divert you from Krishna consciousness. Now, we have this example of Kunti, and you might say, well, Kunti, her husbands are devotees, and she's praying not to be attached. But wouldn't it be okay to be attached if they're devotees? Because the Bhagavatam says the same attachment we have for material things, if we apply that attachment to devotees, then it becomes the source of our liberation. It opens the door. It opens the door to liberation, that attachment. So wouldn't it be good? And the answer is yes. If your husband and wife is a pure devotee, that's a good attachment. If your son and daughter is pure devotee, that's a good attachment. So why is Kunti praying this way? Because she felt there were aspects of her attachment to her sons which were not healthy, which were material, which would cause her bondage, which would cause her to forget Krishna. And so she said, cut those aspects of my affection that are materially bound. So I may be very attached to my husband and wife and children, and I want to cut out any of the material attachments that would cause me to want to enjoy them or get something material from them, or cause me to think of them in a way that would draw me more into the material. So that's the understanding. So if we look at the overall scheme of Bhagavatam, it ultimately culminates ante narayana smriti, that when we die we should think of Krishna. And so material attachments are things we think of at the time of death, so we have to eliminate that, or we have to lessen the attachment so we can become attached to Krishna, because if we're attached to the material, we won't be attached to Krishna. So the idea is not to have strong material attachments getting in the way, so when we leave our body, clearly we can be Krishna conscious. So that's the idea. But the last thing I want to say is that we have a problem sometimes where couples are too detached. They're so detached they don't even have a relationship. It's just dysfunctional, and probably they should have never been married or taken sannyas long ago. So that's not what we're trying to create. And many people come out of the brahmacharya ashram and go into the grihastha ashram, and they're trying to be artificially detached, and their relationships become dysfunctional. They drive their wives crazy, they show no affection and like that. So affection is natural, and we should show it to all devotees. And we have a need for affection to give it and receive it. And if we suppress it, then sometimes we see that man who suppressed it with his wife, it sometimes comes out with another woman. You know, you become detached from your husband or wife, and then you become attached to another man or woman. So these attachments are necessary or natural, and they need to be expressed in a way that they can fulfill our need for affection and relationship without interfering with our relationship with Krishna. I think that's the essence of it. We have needs for affection. It's natural to be attached to those we love, those we're close to, but it should be done in a way which enhances our Krishna consciousness, which ultimately detaches us from Maya, and then becomes the foundation for our becoming pure devotees. Hare Krishna.